Hi, this is Tara. Today I thought let's talk a little bit about the value of Ahimsa or non-violence, especially in a world where we can see the impact of not following that principle, especially coming from a country where Ahimsa is the basis of our freedom struggle, and it is what inspired Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King. And we take great inspiration from the ways in which Mahatma Gandhi and his colleagues put themselves bodily between us, the public, and the British. When around us today we see the impact of leadership that has incited an entire populace to violence on either side, whichever side you are on, and how it may be easy and it may be quick, but it is also reckless and irresponsible because you're not thinking of preserving life and protecting the innocent. So when we see what Mahatma Gandhi did for us, we understand the value of his sacrifice. So let us understand what is this principle of Ahimsa on which he based his entire struggle. Today we have people saying things loosely like dharmo rakshati rakshitaha, and therefore we must all go and fight. We must protect women and children, and we must, inflict ourselves upon others, because if we don't harm them, then they will harm us first. First, let's understand the sentence. What does it actually say? It says dharma eva hato hanti, dharmo rakshati rakshitaha, tasmad dharma na tyajami, mano dharmo hato vadit. What does that mean? It means he who sacrifices virtue is himself destroyed, and he that preserves it is himself preserved. And this is Yudhishthira in the Mahabharata talking to the Yaksha, where he says, I therefore do not sacrifice virtue, considering it that if it is destroyed, it will destroy us. So firstly, he is not talking about destroying people. He's talking about destroying himself, destroying this concept of dharma, which some people translate as righteousness, some people translate as virtue, but it is basically doing what is right. If you destroy this body of knowledge that allows us to do what is right, then we will be destroyed by that very act. And if we preserve it, we will be preserved. So such a beautiful meaning is taken out of context in so many ways, right? So what is it that we need to understand when we talk about ahimsa? The first thing is, let us look at principles like the Second Amendment in the US, which is the right to carry arms, the right to bear arms. Now, in the Western countries, this is something that is very constitutionally enshrined. It is a principle of individual rights. However, in ancient civilizations like China and India, the right to carry a sword was only held by the kings or the highest of soldiers, and they earned those rights. Firstly, the swords are supposed to be endowed with great power, often magical powers. The higher the deities, the more effective and unsurpassable and supreme were their weaponry. And how did those weapons get those powers? Those of us who have watched Ramayana, even on TV as children, with those blazing lights in the battlefield going against astras, what are all of those? Those are basically not the inherent power of a weapon. Unlike today, where, in order to punish people, you keep inventing bigger and bigger weapons with a bigger and bigger radius of damage. Basically, the astra, or the weapon, or the sword that was owned by a king or a rishi or a deity was endowed with the power of that person. This is the equivalence of King Arthur's sword being stuck in the rock, and only a worthy heir would be able to pull it out. What does all of this mean? It basically means that the weapon was gained on the basis of ethics. Somebody who has the capacity to wield that sword had to be ethical, had to have a sense of fairness, had to have a sense of justice, had to use it for good, had to use it to protect. So people say that Sri Krishna told Arjuna in the battlefield that you must kill. Okay, and you do this for good, and you do this to protect dharma, and therefore I have the right to use violence. Are you Arjuna? Do you have his skill? Do you have his craft? Do you have his penance? Do you have his ekagrata? Do you have a sense of justice? Do you see what crippling grief he had before he went into the battlefield? Do you have that love of humanity and of others? Do you do this to protect? And even within the story of the Mahabharata itself is this lesson. Because what it's essentially saying is, you are not the father. Abhimanyu, you are not the father. You do not have the complete knowledge yet. So do not rush in to inflict damage with that half knowledge. So the day you are Arjuna, and you can say, I am equivalent of this great Pandava. Okay, I can shoot the eye of the fish without even looking up, looking at its reflection of the rotating fish in the water. That is my yogic power, and that is my penance. That day you can pick up the sword and go and kill somebody. So unlike the West, where there was this individualistic right to bear arms, in India and China that right has to be earned. And I'm sure in many indigenous cultures over the world, which maybe we do not know of, like Latin American, Incan, indigenous, Native American, these all had hierarchies and practices by which you earned your right. And that is because these weapons would only be entrusted into the hands of somebody who would use it for good, because great damage, as we can see, comes out of a reckless use of violence. So therefore, firstly, understand the nature of violence. Yes, sometimes wars are required. Sometimes it is needed to defend. It is needed to protect. It is needed to even punish the unjust. But it must be held and done by somebody who understands firstly what is justice and has an essential view of universality of the world. So people who unleash violence are always sort of imagining that they will have it under control. But here's the nature of violence, that it cannot be controlled in that way. And that is because everybody who receives, especially in large-scale violence where people are dropping BOMBS and a large mass of people are being KILLED or unalived, okay, what basically happens is that there are repercussions. It is not just that this act is done, people are finished and it's over. Everybody who witnesses it, who experiences it, who survives it, is altered by this act, or even who inflicts it. You cannot inflict this kind of damage and not be changed yourself. Okay, so for instance, let me give you an example. If you have a child, and the very first time you slap that child or you hit that child, say for some punishment, that is the first time you have introduced that child to an act of violence, to an act of anger. And that is the first time that the child has understood that this person who is supposed to protect me can harm me, and therefore I have to look out for myself. So you see, something in that child has changed. Something has been altered and it is irreversible. Okay? And you have made that child understand what violence is. You have made them understand that you can use violence to control or to get your way. So you have made that child a receptacle for violence. You have taught them that nobody is above inflicting violence and everybody can be harmed. So you have created, what have you created? You've created a mirror image. So tomorrow that child might go into the school, into the playground and use violence, or with their sibling, give one smack and say, give me that, that's mine. Okay, every child does not turn out that way, but the child learns firstly the nature of violence, and the child learns resistance. So every time you use violence, no matter on whom, at what scale, you are creating a mirror image of yourself. And because it is a mirror image, it is going to come back to you eventually. Now, it may not come back to you directly from the source that it was given to. That child may go and hit another child, that child may go and hit another child, but eventually, because this is the nature of violence and it's the nature of karmic consequence, the resistance and the violence is going to come back to those who began the chain. This is how we understand violence. Let me give you another example. Basically, there is a seed, and from a seed comes a tree. From the tree, when it flowers, grows hundreds or thousands more flowers and more seeds. And those seeds scatter in the wind, and those create other trees. And from that one single seed, 1,000 seeds. From each of those 1,000 seeds, 1,000 more trees. So you can come and mow down this original tree, thinking, oh, I have spotted you and I'm going to take this down. Which is why, people who justify their acts of violence try and annihilate entire populations, because they think that by doing this, there will be no repercussions, there will be nobody to react. But what happens is the wind will carry that seed, and there will be other forests, and anybody who has witnessed it, who is altered by it, who is influenced by it, will pick up these seeds and will grow. So it may not even be within the same generation. It will be few generations down when these stories are carried and told, and people understood how they have been victimized or targeted. As we understand today the impacts of previous incidents and wars and slavery and all of these horrific things that have happened in the history of mankind. And it will come back in some form or the other. This is the reason why violence is essentially cyclical. The nature of violence is cyclical. So here's the thing. When that seed is planted, the first seed of violence is planted, you cannot control the outcome. You cannot say, I have planted it here and there will be an equal and opposite reaction and that's it. Because it will grow into a tree, the tree into 1,000 seeds, each seed into 1,000 trees, 1,000 trees into 1,000. So you see the multiplier effect. It is beyond our control. Okay. So, and that is the nature for all actions in the world. All samkharas, as the Buddhists call it, or samskaras, as the Hindus call it. Every action has a consequence, has a reverberation, has a vibration, a karmic consequence in the world. So since we cannot control the outcome of these vibrations, because it's interacting with a lot of other influences, a lot of other people, their mindset, their experiences, their samskaras, right? All we can do is ensure that the seed we are planting is not violent. Because if you plant ahimsa, non-violence, peace, your resulting tree will be sprouting seeds of peace. If you plant a tree of violence, your resulting tree will be sprouting seeds of violence. So we cannot control the outcome. There's a huge multiplier effect, but you can control what is the seed that you are planting. So people who are telling you that, oh no, you must react in violence, are essentially recruiting you to their agenda without explaining to you that there is a multiplier effect, and the consequence of each seed of violence that you are planting is borne by you alone. The repercussion will come to you alone or whoever has planted it. So it's very convenient to use these statements and throw them about and ask people to, stand up to the cause. But understand that you do not need to be recruited to a violent cause. First, understand the consequence of what will happen if you do. And you can always choose another way. You can negotiate, you can use diplomacy, you can use patience, you can use kindness, you can use love, you can use compassion, you can use giving, you can use generosity, you can take the high road. And it may be harder, it may take much longer. It's much faster to create a BOMB and fling it about and not have to bother with people who you assume don't have the power to speak back to you. But the eventual and final cyclic consequence is yours and yours alone. So please do consider the great sacrifice that our leaders made when they gave us independence, how they fought against an empire and ensured that our people lived in peace, that there was no war, that there was goodwill, that we maintained and protected the innocent. And this has been our legacy through centuries. So, given a choice between Himsa and Ahimsa, always choose Ahimsa, because dharmo rakshati rakshitaha. When you do the right thing will do good by you. Take care, stay safe, and don't get swept into other people's agendas. Thank you so much for listening.